Because Assassin Focus is one of the only new and unique actions revealed for Mirage, I haven't stopped thinking on it. I wrote down my reflections and am posting them here to look back on later, both after UB Forward and during the game's release to see if I was right. What is Assassin Focus? Assassin Focus is a special action Basim unlocks that lets him chain a short sequence of kills on a group of guards. They must all be standing a small distance from each other. It's an incredibly powerful move, but it has limits, both in terms of activation cost, as it seems to require charging either a resource or time passing, but also in terms of coverage, as Basim is implied to start with only 2 kills per charge. This is a wild guess, but I say so only because this is clearly meant to be his replacement for a double assassination. The reason I also say 2 is because that's what this article said from earlier in Mirage's marketing cycle. Of course, one of the benefits of something like a stealth kill chain over double assassinate is that double assassinate often forces guards to walk in pairs or to jerk into place oddly in order for the animation to line up. With a stealth chain, you get a multi-kill that's more versatile and usable in more situations. Assassin Focus is not Rush Assassinate. This is important, the two are very different. Rush Assassinate is empowered by a piece of Eden. Assassin Focus comes innately from Basim himself and isn't done with any external tools, certainly nothing outlandish. The reason this is important is it means it still obeys the human limits of the Assassin's Creed universe. Like other abilities that player assassins have access to, Assassin Focus scrapes against the upper bound of what seems feasible, because that's what Assassin's Creed's flavor has always been. A kind of stylish, hyper-real universe, not quite our own. You can look up hyper-reality on Google if you're curious about more details on the topic, but the best immediate comparison is something like John Wick. Both of these stories express hyper-reality. They each follow protagonists who have a veneer of realism on a surface level, which is just enough to fool anyone who is just starting each series, but in terms of skill and ability, they're both beyond what the best trained combatants would ever be able to do in our world. Good Assassin's Creed games try to honor this principle, and while it doesn't actually mean it'll be great based on this alone, it's pleasant to see Mirage honor it too. A few notable ones are AC1, Brotherhood, Black Flag, and Unity, all in different ways. Some player characters express this in movement, some in combat, and some in how powerful their eagle vision is, which is already a hyper-real flavored mechanic. No one in our world has that kind of sense or is descended from a superior species, for example. Rush Assassinate can be done at unfathomable distances. You can do it so far that it's often best used as a movement tool. This affects how players see it, but also affects its gameplay strength, which is where Assassin Focus opts to be somewhat more grounded. Assassin Focus requires close-range engagement, and only works on targets that are very near to both you and each other. It's hard to speculate from the footage alone, but I get the sense that generally speaking, if you can assassinate or air assassinate someone, you can also use them to start a focus chain. The way I see this is pretty simple. Despite how the Animus is displaying it with its shiny animation, in reality, Basim is not doing anything an incredibly talented rogue in the Assassin's Creed universe wouldn't be able to physically do. Many players ignore that last part. Assassin's Creed as a world is partially defined by its player characters being able to do almost impossible things. And the almost is important there. And there's a reason for that. It's for more than just looking cool. It has another purpose too, and that purpose has been there since the first game, although it's one that modern Assassin's Creed doesn't always express properly. That purpose is as follows. Nearly impossible techniques or actions are one of the ways that nothing is true, everything is permitted has been evoked as mechanical poetry since 2007. The simplest example is that leaps of faith are a fundamentally impossible action for the average assassin, let alone the average human, who would be even more hopeless. Most lack the centered mind and awareness of themselves in the world to execute it properly, but master assassins are above average, and so they can. AC1 goes damn hard out of its way to make sure we understand this, by showing us a direct contrast. An assassin who fails his leap of faith, while Altair barely breaks a sweat. The rest of the series continues to use actions or techniques that make your breath catch in your lungs to express a master assassin's mastery of being an assassin as well. In Brotherhood, Ezio Auditore himself uses a leap of faith as the capstone to every initiate's learning process, including his own sister. In the very same game, Desmond Miles does a leap of faith to the complete shock of his entire cell, Lucy Stillman especially. Finally, although there are more examples in the series than these, AC Unity eventually just gives up and practically says it directly into the camera. Pierre Belec, before Arno's leap of faith off the Bastille, tells him, "Impossible? That's the purview of every assassin boy." Now, there is a dark side to this, and it's something that players who feel uncomfortable with Assassin Focus's animation have been waiting for me to talk about. It's also really important to me, so I'm gonna talk about it now. It's fascinating to think about how easy to shatter by a careless writer that classic Assassin's Creed essence really is. The simplest way? Be clumsy instead of surgical with what I just described. The truest assassins all graze and just scrape the upper limit of what's possible with normal human capabilities. But the thing is, as soon as you blow way over that threshold into straight up actually impossible, well, all assassin essence just falls apart and dies instantly. The thing is, while Odyssey for example did this, I don't think Mirage actually will. Worth noting as well is the way the Animus colors all this. The Animus is always made ambiguous the incredible feats player character assassins do, and again this stretches back to the first game. Did Altair really do every leap of faith after that first one, or is the machine just sustaining the simulation by using base data from the 1 or 2 times in his life that he actually did? If you care about the Assassin's Creed storyline and are way too passionate about its details like us, then it's tough to say, right? It's canonically true that the Animus displays biased information, which is based on how an assassin experienced various situations in their life. Their perceptions, emotional state, what they focus on, and where their blind spots were, things they never noticed. All of this is encoded as genetic memory, and that's what's experienced by the user. Read the Abstergo Employee Handbook tie-in to Ace Unity for more information on this frankly very spooky and unsettling concept. And taking it a step further, the Animus loves to use, base information and base data to extrapolate additional possibilities if it will make achieving the user's goals faster. So this ties into assassin focus once again. All of those blue traces and after images you see really tell me is that Basim feels he's moving that fast, because his senses of everything except his targets fade away until they're all dead again and he sees the world normally once more. Very, very cool, and crucially for me and many classic fans, very adherent to Assassin's Creed as a sci-fi universe. This type of mechanic is present in other third-person stealth action games. The way each handles it is different, and by looking at 3 of these and asking why it's balanced the way it is in all of them, we can get a good idea of how Mirage might approach it. In Arkham Knight, Fear Takedown is balanced by both its cost and disruptive effect. This is designed to tax Batman's mobility, which pushes the player into parts of gameplay that help define the Arkham game's identity. After a Fear Takedown, nearby active guards will grow suspicious due to their allies' panic gunfire. Since suspicious enemies move more erratically and quickly than unbothered ones, this displaces Batman back into the shadows. What this does is discard your current positioning, even if it was strong, and causes you to observe your enemies before engaging from a different angle. This reflects the fantasy of Batman across every expression of himself in various media. He's strongest when he strikes unseen, or uses panic to his advantage to destabilize the situation in his favor, or when he uses fear to shake enemies away from an area he doesn't want them near, like an objective or hostage. In Splinter Cell Blacklist, Mark and Execute is a mechanic balanced by its cost, and by restriction at high difficulty. To use Mark and Execute, Sam first needs to charge it by doing normal melee takedowns. You can't refill it with ranged actions, which means earning it puts you at risk of detection. The specific weapon Sam is holding also affects the maximum number of marks you can have active at once. Sam also can't mark and execute on the highest difficulty. This is one potential way of balancing such a powerful ability, and while locking a unique ability can be very damaging to a game's design in some cases, when it comes to Splinter Cell this actually works very well, since it honors the series' legacy and the intended ideal player fantasy. Much like Metal Gear games dock your score for unnecessary kills, Sam Fisher is, when roleplayed to capacity and expressed at his narrative apex, a non-lethal ghost who is so skilled and so professional he simply doesn't need to engage anything but his targets. And Ghost of Tsushima's chain assassination carries no real cost. It's balanced purely by opportunities or lack of them. Enemies in Ghost of Tsushima don't always clump up enough to be killed more than 2 at a time, and depending on the area, a chain assassinate might never be possible at all. To offset this, the player is given some agency to actively group enemies at will by using distractions like chimes or firecrackers. Even with that slight advantage though, chain assassinates are rare enough in Ghost of Tsushima that it typically feels like a payoff you've been anticipating for a while whenever you do land one of decent length. So right off the bat, I don't think we'll see focus being disabled at high difficulty. We certainly shouldn't, as I feel this would be the wrong move for Assassin's Creed. As I said last video, when a game features a mechanic the rest of its series lacks, and when that mechanic isn't just a random skill in a tree, but something attached to parts of a main character's story, this plays a role in defining the game's identity and making it stand out from the rest of the series or genre. This is part of the player fantasy and intended experience, evoking who Basim is as a person, as a killer, as a hidden one. In the case of Sam Fisher's Mark and Execute being disabled, Sam's idealized form is a ghost, as we covered. He's not really the type of man to kill unnecessarily or stylishly, even if you as a player might enjoy expressing yourself that way while controlling him. Splinter Cell has always encouraged non-lethal play in a way Assassin's Creed has never really valued, even if with some effort you can play Assassin's Creed like that. Indeed, these games by contrast lean very heavily on the cool factor of elimination stealth, especially fast-paced elimination stealth, and always have. They typically do one of two things, depending on the exact game you're playing. They either place a premium on flow and never stopping movement as the most effective stealth playstyle, or make it so smooth and enjoyable to play with momentum that it's likely a skilled player will accidentally fall into that approach anyway. This is wild to think about, because that's still the case even in games that have the weakest parkour, like Origins and Odyssey. Stats aside, moving quickly and rapidly scratching out camps full of guards became a pattern players naturally found themselves in once they got used to the way each of those two games designed their enemy layouts. The scale of those games and how fast it was to harvest 5 or 6 enemies a short distance from each other both combined to push a speed slayer approach if you didn't want to spend even more time than you were already forced to. I mean, of course, unless your build and stats fell apart and then the game just said no to you. I didn't bring up Valhalla here because speed stealth has always been punished by that game, which suggests to me that it didn't understand what Assassin's Creed stealth is meant to be. Besides, actual Vikings were hit-and-run raiders who didn't want to stick around. That was their entire response to slow-moving armies of soldiers. Fast stealth should have literally been their main historically accurate thing as an archetype. But I'm not gonna get into that again, I've already poured my soul out about it enough. Especially when considering the games that do have stronger parkour, like Brotherhood or Unity, speed and stealth have always been interlinked in Assassin's Creed, so seeing Basim's presumed strongest ability being an expression of both stealth and speed only makes sense to me. Assassin Focus is fast, lethal, and safe. So how do I think this will be balanced in a way that makes a player think twice before using it, but without it being so unpleasant and boring they just stop bothering with the ability at all? I envision limits on chain length, like being able to kill no more than 4 guards, maybe 5 if the game is really pushing the lethal assassin power fantasy, but that's stretching it. I also envision some kind of resource that has to be filled and spent. If you want to perform the crazy chain assassination, you need to prime it from an isolated guard or 2 elsewhere first. The reason I like this is that it's the most proactive anti-spam measure available. It will slow down all players, but skilled players who can quickly identify stray guards in an environment can be rewarded with more frequent kill chains for paying attention to their surroundings, like a strong assassin should. That would be my ideal. Of course, the other way I see them doing it is with a cooldown of some kind, which I don't like, and I don't think is optimal in this case. The reason why is that a cooldown is a passive consequence, which means it promotes passivity in general. It kind of clashes with the flow-based, speed-based playstyle the devs themselves are bashing us over the head claiming Basim is gonna have, right? In some regards, it can also promote hoarding, as in refusing to use the action. When you know you can proactively refill your focus by playing effectively, the control is in your hands, so whether you hoard it or burn it is a genuine decision based on your context. Sometimes you do want to hold on to it, and sometimes you don't. At some times, the time and positioning cost of using it can be lesser, at other times greater. On the other hand, when you know the cost is a cooldown, well, the time cost is always the same, and the positioning cost is barely a factor, because you don't have to do anything on your end to get it back. Just chill a little until it comes back. Overall, the safest and simplest way to implement it, but one that I would strongly push back on because of the effect it would have on the game's experiential flow. A resource-based cost typically pushes you to engage with the world around you more directly and actively, since you know you have to get it back yourself. A cooldown-based cost promotes passivity in camping, since you know if you just wait a little, well, you're gonna have a powerful ability back online for free. Those are just my thoughts on it. There are of course pros and cons to each, and a cooldown can also be a fire and forget type cost where the upside is that you don't need to care about refilling it. You can just leave it in the back of your mind and keep slaying out knowing that it'll return on its own. If they do go with a cooldown, maybe it's because they value that for the experience more. Personally, I always have a preference for player accountability when it comes to powerful moves like this, and if you spend something, I generally enjoy getting it back myself, since that's another avenue to improve at the game, enjoy its area design, and appreciate its guard layouts in a more tactile manner. As with any unique action serving as one of a game's iconic features, Assassin Focus has a bit riding on it. If done poorly, like by being unpleasant to use, not actually being effective, or being boring to redeploy, it can end up souring the experience. On the other hand, if it's strong, carries a reasonable cost and friction to it, and resonates with the flow of the rest of the game, it can elevate both the game itself and its player character Basim even higher, since this is part of how he expresses himself as an operative in this universe. He's not just concerned with dealing damage and staying unseen, he perceives himself to be fast and deadly while doing it, and so we do too. Calling back to the earlier Assassin's Creed games and their use of hyper-reality to express their themes, as well as their characters' mastery of their faction's philosophies and techniques is a great move, and one that I hope pays off similarly if it can strike a sweet spot of both being fun to use and not being so unbelievable that it shatters the edge of hyper-reality and blasts right off into fantasy. I think its aesthetic and mechanical distinctions from previous similar abilities will help it in that regard, as well as its easy comparison to chain takedowns from other games, much more grounded than something like Odyssey or Valhalla. Arkham, Splinter Cell, Ghost of Tsushima, they all use chain takedowns, and in them, outright fantasy is either at a minimum or completely absent. I think Assassin's Creed needs to find its own line and its own balance for this ability, but if it does, then it's perfectly fine for Basim to have it, and for us as players to have access to it when thinking through our strategies. Thank you for listening. May fog shroud you, may stars light your way, and may the night keep you safe.